So it is 4 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Climate Live K12 session for students, educators, and the public. My name is Laurel Zaimashihi, and I'll be facilitating the session today. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Columbia Climate School or joining us for the first time, the Climate School is a newly established school at Columbia University for transdisciplinary climate research. The school marshals the university's strength in basic and applied disciplines and expands its resources to understand climate and its impact on society, develop and inspire knowledge-based solutions, and educate future leaders for just and prosperous societies on a healthy planet. The Climate School is the first new school at Columbia in over 25 years, so we're extremely excited. And it incorporates more than 20 different centers, over 700 people who collaborate among different departments at the university, and this allows us to better connect, amplify, and advance new areas of climate inquiry, research, and impact across Columbia and beyond. So what we're hoping to do with these Climate Lab K12 sessions are to introduce you to our interdisciplinary work through our scientific experts. These monthly sessions run throughout the academic year. Our last session will be in June 2024. If you have any if you'd like any additional information about the upcoming sessions or the past sessions, you can check them out at our website, and I'll put the website in the chat in just a moment. And you can also contact me directly at learn@climate.columbia.edu. Each week, we focus on a certain topic, and it's directed toward a certain age range as well. So for this month's session, Knowing Your Geography, Data Mapping for Sustainable Development, you're going to learn from Radhika and Haein from the Center for Sustainable Development on how to use technology, data, and creative storytelling to develop your climate action plans. In this session, you're going to also hear from two eco-ambassadors who are on a journey to leverage data to drive climate solutions that are in alignment with the Sustainable Development Goals. A little housekeeping here. We have time for questions at the end, so please use the Q&A box as the chat is disabled, and we will be sure to answer all your questions at the very end. This session is also recorded, and you can find it on our Climate School YouTube page tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you all so we can learn more about sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurel, and thank you for organizing these sessions. I think they are really vital for all the learners who are interested in learning about climate education, climate sciences, as well as education for sustainable development. So I'll share my screen. I hope you all are able to see the slide. So we'll be talking specifically about mapping, data mapping, geography, sustainable development. What are the things that combine all these elements together? And usually in our schools, geography is treated separately, sustainable development is treated separately. So this is a way of combining the two elements, including data. So we have math, geography, and sustainable development all together. And what are we doing together? So here is our journey. This program is Eco Ambassadors program, which runs every summer, but we have spillover programs that continue throughout summer and throughout the year. Eco Ambassadors is a program that helps you to understand all these different elements. It helps you to understand, gives you a science background. Since we are from the climate school at Columbia University, we do a lot of science-based information. And we also help to understand how can youth leadership skills be involved to take this learning forward. And we also have this intersection of sustainable development, which looks at the different pillars of sustainable development, which is environment, social sector, which is health and education. We have good governance, and we have, again, economics, which becomes a big part of the pillar. So I want us to look at all these various aspects of sustainable development as we go forward with our program. And here is some bit of information about our program. We just came back from COP recently from Dubai, and we were able to have our eco ambassadors. Two of our eco ambassadors, Vidya Bindal as well as Ishan Jain, who were able to represent their work over the past couple of years. And we've been able to encourage students, especially the young generation, to share their stories, but with a sustainable development goals lens. And we'll be able to go through the SDGs, we'll be able to go through a lot of different personal marrying their personal narrative with the SDGs as we go forward. And COP was a great place where we were able to combine science, social science, advocacy, climate advocacy, as well as eco activism through the Eco Ambassadors program. What is for summer 2023 specifically, as I had mentioned, what were we able to do? We were able to look at data and mapping. This is a very science and GIS data driven exercise or summer that we had gone through, all of us together. There were students who had joined from Latin America, Brazil, Turkey, Syria, India, US, New Jersey, California, so many different places. And we all use these common elements, geospatial data. We were able to work on the visuals. We were able to work on getting the data together, and we were able to write stories together, which speaks to our own passion and our own commitment towards sustainability in our own neighborhoods. So I think that is really important, because we need to have a science-based background, and we need to have our way of narrating the story so that people can understand, and people can use are able to visualize what we are what our stories are in a more succinct manner. And that was the main goal for our summer program. So now I'll ask my colleague Haein to go over some of the story maps and just give you a sense of how all these things were combined as we went on with our programming. Haein?
Thank you, Radhika. If we can go back to our prior slide, Radhika, just so I can go over the different components. So I think as Radhika just shared, there are different pieces that can come together when it comes to data mapping. For the purpose of our program, we of course base it on data, but we really don't want to lose the written aspect and the visual aspect, which is telling a story, building a narrative, and how does all these global issues, why does it matter, and how is it really relevant for you and your community, your local areas, your region, your country, right? So I'm sure many of you are either familiar with, or you've heard of the term GIS, Geographic Information Systems, which is computer-based tools used to, store, visualize, analyze, and interpret geographic data. So this, our Eco Ambassador program, and what we really encourage our students to do is to not let information stay as they are, but how do you bring in your analysis, and how do you bring your story and the important issues of your community into the picture, especially with the lens of sustainable development, so sustainable development issues, right? So what's really key in, thank you. So what's really key in when you look at this data, this is just one example, is carbon dioxide emissions around the world. And of course, this could just stay as a map, but as information is getting updated, the beauty of a GIS system these days and the data is that because information can be updated real time, you also get the most accurate and the latest data, right? But the data doesn't just stay there. How do you really bring the scientific research, the numbers together? And in the end, the really big important part is that, societal decision-making takes place based on these data that is shared, right? So they're used for different analysis, they're used for policy making, they're used for our own local storytelling, so that the stories from around the world are not just distant stories, but they're relevant to many other people in other parts of the world. And also as advocacy tools. So our eco ambassadors have also used this information as not just a geographical map that shows different data points, but how can we use this as a tool for climate education and for our advocacy? Just wanted to highlight that, and we want to definitely give our two eco ambassadors today enough time to share their stories. And then I think, Radhika, back to you for sharing this upcoming year's program.
Thank you, Haein. That was a very nice description of the carbon emission data and geography tool. Maybe if you can share the link in the chat or in the Q&A, or maybe send it to Laurel, we can everyone else can benefit from this. So for this summer, what we will be doing is again focusing something which is very concrete. We are working with the New Jersey, New York Sea Grant Consortium, and we will, with the Eco Ambassadors program, we will be conducting lessons on microplastic in water, and then it will also again involve GIS. It will involve story mapping, which is basically creating your own story with your own results, and you will be able to analyze some of these water samples in your own neighborhood and see how much microplastic content there is in the water, and you'll be able to analyze, think like a scientist, and you'll be able to again conduct field work, do your sample collection, go to a lab at Columbia University and analyze the samples to see again the content of the microplastic, and then share the stories, share your results in a story map that will be shared across on our websites, as well as it will be helpful for you to share these stories in your own neighborhoods and to see what you can do as a part of the results, and how what who are the stakeholders in your community that will be interested in your results, and at least you'll be able to become a scientist and share the content of your analysis and maps and stories. So it will be a lot of learning, and it will be a lot of science-based learning, as well as community-based education that you will receive through this particular summer program. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out. We can send you a link on how to join the program. There is a barcode here. If you want to use the barcode, scan the barcode and join our Eco Ambassador program. We'll go over to the next slide. So we have two Eco Ambassadors, Anvi, Anand, and Shriya Iyer. We will be going over their story maps that they created this summer. They are both from Melbourne in New Jersey. They are both high schoolers, and they are here. I'm so happy that Anvi and Shriya both are here, taking time out from their busy schedule, as well as braving the storm and being collected and having to share their important work that they did over summer with us as a part of the Eco Ambassador Summer Program. They created a story map. So I want them to not only go over the story map, but tell us, how did you come up with this question that you are looking at, and how did GIS and the story maps and how did you conduct this research, and how did it help you how did these tools that you acquired in the Eco Ambassadors program, which are all GIS, data mapping, creating a story, how did they all come together in your story map? So I'll ask them to share. I'll stop sharing, and I'll ask them to share their screen if possible. Otherwise, I have it open also. I can go over whatever you like, Shriya and Anvi.
Yeah, I can share from my side.
So,
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Anvi Anand, and I participated in the Eco Ambassador Summer Program this summer with Shriya Iyer, and together we formulated the story map around climate justice and the wars inflicting the people and the planet. And these are not just one, but two extremely crucial issues that are daunting our Earth. And we the future lies in our hands as change makers, and you'll kind of see our own perspective of that through this story. Handing it over to Shriya.
Hi, I'm Shriya. I'm a ninth grader at Melbourne High School. And like Anvi said, our story map is mainly about the Russian-Ukrainian war and the Taliban. So since we created the story map during the summer, these issues were at an all-time high. Regarding the Russia and Ukraine war, millions of people were dying every day. There were battles occurring, and people were emigrating the country at such large rates. For the Taliban, it was 2023, and these horrendous acts were being inflicted upon people. We thought it was awful, and we decided to do more research into this. We chose SDG 16, which is promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels.
And while we were researching, we noticed that all of these wars had really like big impacts on not just like on society, but also like on the environment. And this led us to choose SDG 13, which is like taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And through like all of these sources and views, we formulated a more general overview of these issues, not only in like a war and data aspect, but also in like the societal and environmental aspects through a more like journalistic approach.
In the story map, we really wanted to like emphasize the voices of those experiencing the struggle, because we strongly believe that until you truly empathize with the people who are like facing this, you don't really understand the impact of it. Like, for example, until we started really researching into this topic and all of the like in-depth issues that were occurring to all these people, the numbers were just numbers. It was like, oh, this many people are dying, that's awful. But then when you read their stories and their perspectives and everything they faced, it really hits you. So we thought it was extremely important to emphasize that, especially considering we don't see as much of that in the news these days.
Exactly. One example of that was like a woman who was suppressed during the Taliban, and she wrote like a firsthand account of this issue. And through that, we really like acquired her, like her feelings, her emotions, and everything she went through in a more, again, like Shriya said, in a more like empathetic way. And without like such short sources, we wouldn't have been able to really connect with her, especially in those circumstances. And that's a main part of our research, like how we connected with other, like with all these people who are facing these wars. And we formulated more, again, like more general, like a more general overview of it through like the story map, so we could educate you on these topics and also give you a broader understanding of solutions that you can do, even though you are not put into this position right now.
Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna talk about one of the Ukrainian stories we have first. Sorry, it's loading.
Can open it. Oops. It's not loading. Sorry.
Okay, while that's happening, I guess I could just talk about it then.
Yeah.
So basically, the story is about a family, they're like olgers, right? So they've lived in Ukraine for practically their whole lives. They know every person on the street. They know their supermarket, all the prices. They know everything about their hometown. They empathize with it. They've lived there for so many generations, right? So it's coming. Her name's Victoria, and suddenly her daughters calls one day and they're like, we're leaving. Ukraine is getting too dangerous. There was a bomb that landed practically next door to her apartment. There were people found dead, people that she knew, and it was getting too dangerous to stay there. They had to move all the way across the world because of this war. People were forced to leave the places that they were comfortable with. And this really, we thought this really drove home the point of how much these people have to adapt to their circumstances, how much they've had to face, and how much resilience they have to go through all this and come out standing strong. So we wanted to highlight that. And we also wanted to introduce, like Anvi said earlier, we wanted to have a journalistic approach of this, and we wanted to include both sides of the war. So what I feel one of our most important points was that this isn't the Russians' fault. These people don't know as much as we think they do. They aren't the ones like, we should have the war. No, that's Putin. So one quote that we think like really spoke out to this was the quote, "Tell a lie so big that people will not believe that you would ever try to deceive them on such a grand scale." The Putin regime does something similar. A bit of history, but stated by Putin, the Ukrainian independence movement began during World War II, not the commonly accepted year of 1917. Allegedly, under the German occupation of Ukraine between 1941 and 1944, Ukrainian freedom fighters allied with the Nazis, whom they viewed as saviors from Soviet oppression. This version isn't blatantly untrue, but by omitting crucial events and details, he builds another universe, far apart from reality. For example, Putin failed to mention that under Soviet rule, Ukrainians were subject to genocide as well as suppression, most famously the Holodomor, sorry if I mispronounced that, or the Great Famine. This man-made famine resulted in the loss of life for more than 3.9 million people, 13% of the Ukrainian population at the time. So, understandably, when the Germans invaded in 1941, Ukrainians saw them as liberators. But the problem is, now, Putin is claiming that Ukraine is still a Nazi nation, which is not true. Maybe it once was, but it is no longer. But his use of propaganda in the speech he gave on February 24th, which was when the war began, he said, "I made a decision to carry out a special military operation. The purpose of this operation is to protect people who, for 8 years now, have been facing humiliation and genocide perpetrated by the Kiev regime. To end this, we will seek to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, as well as bring to a trial those who perpetrated numerous bloody crimes against civilians, including against citizens of the Russian Federation." His use of propaganda in this speech uncovers a much darker truth, that of the war of silence in Putin's own home country. By manipulating the thoughts of his citizens of Kremlin through the restriction of outside information, Putin silently increases his sphere of influence. If we do not bear caution to the scheme of Russia, we may find ourselves in another world war, which was, again, one of the main reasons why we chose this topic as our topic for the SDG story map. In fact, Zelensky said, "The whole world has to decide whether we want to stop Putin or whether we want to start the beginning of a world war. We can't change Putin. Russian society has lost respect of the world. They elected him and re-elected him and raised a second Hitler. They did this. We cannot go back in time, but we can stop it here." And we thought this was important. A World War III is a huge thing, especially at a time when we've just come out of COVID. So many countries are in such an awful economic state, not to mention societal and environmental state. And on top of that, so many people lost their lives to COVID, and there's the Taliban happening on this side too. We thought it was important to acknowledge this and try to do whatever we can to stop it, whether that means spreading awareness or showing support to them, which we'll be discussing later through the solutions we propose. Okay, now moving on to how this really affects what we're here for, the climate. So the ongoing war in Russia and Ukraine is of great importance because not only does it result in millions of deaths, it may be because this war is going to be one of the biggest effects of climate change to come. It's not only has this war completely destroyed the ecosystem of Ukraine, almost 3 million of Ukraine's protected areas have been bombed, polluted, burned, and hit by the militaries. Fires have rained across Ukraine, further damaging their society, which is already at a low due to the war. And what's most concerning is that Ukraine is one of the most environmentally protected. It has the most diverse ecosystem in all of Europe. It has rare steppes, which contain plants and animals that we haven't found anywhere else in the world. And these are being destroyed due to the foolishness of man. And it's quite shocking because we may never, ever get these plants and animals again. Once it's happened, it's long gone. And these fires that we were mentioning earlier produce 15% of the war emissions and release around 18 million metric tons of carbon emissions into the environment. This is a caveat for the whole world. These fires and the military bombings have in fact caused European children to suffer one of the worst air qualities. In fact, many European children do suffer from diseases relating to the poor quality of their air, which is, again, something extremely damaging, not only to now, but to the future, as many of it is young children who we rely on.
Shriya and we just maybe quickly, I wanted to ask you, this is fascinating, but I wanted to ask you how, this whole idea of the story map and creating this thing on this platform, data, visuals, maybe something on that so that we can, end it with the students getting some ideas on how you were able to come up with all this thing together, and was this GIS information, this mapping that you are doing, was it helpful to show your story as you go along? Sorry to interject.
Yeah, so I think we can move on to one of our the data aspect of the story map, which was this attacked regions during the war. And Shriya, you can elaborate.
Right. So here, what we try to do is the blue would be what I believe Ukraine has, sorry, Russia has, no, it's an accidental missile, sorry, where Russia has attacked another country instead of Ukraine, which again increases the possibility for a world war. The red represents all of the places and areas in Europe that Russia has attacked them. It includes the casualties and the date of it. And you can see it's very widely spread throughout Ukraine. So it's not one particular area that's suffering, but all of Ukraine. Uh, the yellow represents, I believe, the captured territory and the territory that Ukraine has attacked. So the Republic and Crimea and European Russia are the only two places that they have attacked. There's no specific location.
And I just wanted to add, like, while in our process to like for collecting all this research, through StoryMap, they have like a bunch of templates, and we specifically chose like this template, which is like a map template where you can add like different points and like add information about it. So like through StoryMap, we were able to use this to really portray our like research and our like the collection of all of these numbers into like one place. And it's a very like good, it's a very like efficient feature to use, especially because like it shows like the widespread of the missiles all around like Ukraine and Russia. So like this was really helpful for us too.
In general, I think the story maps, they were a great way to provide visualization to this topic, and it makes it a lot more easier to understand. For example, for this, and then later on in the Taliban, there's a map detailing all of the different locations and timelines, and it was very helpful to like organize your thoughts and make it easier to understand.
Yeah. And then I'll quickly summarize like SDG 16 with Taliban. So basically, the Taliban, they're like a group in Afghanistan right now, and they basically restricted a bunch of rights for both women and even men. And they've taken like all the freedoms away. And like these are some pictures we used like, to add to this, like so you can see. And basically, it started on August 15, and here's like a timeline of all the events and how like every event got worse, like more rights were taken away, and how like even natural disasters contributed to it. And yeah, and then like some stuff about like men too, even though like the Taliban took a lot of rights away from women, men are also being affected by this because after the Taliban took over, like again their mindsets became a lot more violent because they were like always put into danger, and since like in Afghanistan the men are considered like the rough and like the strong people of the family, and they a lot of pressure were put onto men as well that weren't part of the Taliban. So it shows like also almost a little bit of SDG 5 a bit about like gender inequality and women, but also there's aspects of men. So like through our story map, we wanted to like give you an approach from both like the women's side and the men's side and how they're being affected. And then quickly, I just wanted to talk about the climate crisis in Afghanistan. So basically, like because Afghanistan is in a place where like it's very vulnerable to all of these natural disasters. Since they have like an agricultural economy, like due to all of these disasters, like their economy hasn't been in great shape, and it's like it's been affecting that like their environment. And after the Taliban took away a lot of Afghanistan's like departments, like they took away from Afghanistan's like national water department, which was really important. And like in Afghanistan, there's a lake called the Kwarga Lake, and this lake is approximately like 1/3 of a square mile, and like during the past 3 years, like 2/3 of the surface area has been reduced due to all the droughts caused by global warming. And since the Taliban aren't doing anything like for it to fix this, it's getting worse every day, and like it's losing like 50% of its like capacity. And this water source like links to like Kabul, like the capital of Afghanistan, and this like water source like supplies a lot of livestock and fresh like and food, and it's really helpful for the food industry of Afghanistan. But since the Taliban's international sanctions on the government, like from international countries, they've had no help from other countries due to their like I guess like political stance and like after like the Afghan war from the US. So there hasn't been a lot of help on that side due to that. And like just again, this is a story map feature where you can basically add like different locations and info for each. So it takes you around. Yeah. And then one more thing, this is a really good feature, I thought, because like if you were if you could see like the effects of climate change on the Kargil Lake in Kabul. So basically like 3 years ago, the Kargil Lake was like around this tall. And now if you look at it like now, it's pretty it's gone a lot down. So you can this is like a really big climate effect on this lake, which is a very important and significant lake of Kabul and of Afghanistan. So that's like one of the other climate effects that I wanted to add in. And like this is definitely a humanitarian problem, but it's also a very big environmental problem that we have to pursue before it reaches the point of no return. So how you can help heal the world. These are like some of our solutions we created. So before like doing anything, make sure you're very educated on these topics because if you're not educated, it can lead to a lot of misunderstanding and this will cause a lot of chaos that we don't need right now, especially with all of these wars going on. And
another thing is to make sure you're not immediately biased towards one side. Go in accepting information with an open mind. That way you thoroughly understand all information before forming an opinion.
And then another thing, just like what this, like the goal of this program is, like you should like initiate campaigns, like gather with people and focus on a goal you really want to become passionate in so other people can also partake in it. Like this eco ambassador program really like enlightened me on that. And like through that, I've been participating in a lot of my own, like in my town's committee about this. And like, you should really take that step to do that because it's really helpful for you and it's helpful for like your people, like the people around you and for like the planet. And like even though you a lot of people think in the short term, but you should always think in the long term as well because the short term is just like think about both the short term and the long term effects and like start with your community and like just take it a step forward. That's like what my main advice would be.
Great. Thank you so much, Shriya and Anvi. I think great example of having different layers and different features of story maps coming together. We see slides, we see data. There is then one question from Lee and Martinez about the data that you were able to access online. So just maybe review like the data that you were able to access on ArcGIS if possible.
Like the missiles.
There's this question on carbon dioxide increase with bombings, or were you able to get some particulate data or anything
Yeah,
you
so
think would be relevant?
regarding like Russia and Ukraine and the carbon emissions, we actually used the EEA Europe, and it gave us a lot of data. There was a report released in 2020, and that was around the time when the war was at its most severe. So we used that for a lot of information. And there was also another release that they did in 2023, and it's the website. Should I put the link inside the chat?
Sure, that would be great. This has been so informative, and it's so impressive that you created this through the Eco Ambassadors program. And there's clearly so much more information to really dig into. I'm gonna have to take some time to really read through some of these things. But I think this shows the power of GIS and story maps and how you can really tell a story through data visualizations and through imagery. So thank you so much for sharing this with us and spending the last 30 minutes talking about your work. It's very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I recognize that we're over time, so thank you so much for joining us for the Climate Live session for January. I hope you join us again in February. And if you do have any questions for any of our speakers today that we didn't have a chance to get to, feel free to email me and I would be sure to connect you together. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for joining.
Have a good evening.